So the iPadOS 18 betas have been out for a couple of weeks now, and it can be quite hard to decipher which features are actually useful and worth trying out. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. I'll be covering 7 new features in iPadOS 18 that you need to know about. Let's get into it. So the first feature on our list is the new calculator app.
Wow.
Now I promise you that I'm not trolling you here, because there are some unique things about this calculator app that I specifically want to talk about. So when you first go into the app, it will just look like a blown up version of the standard iPhone calculator app. If you tap on the calculator at the bottom, you can switch to a scientific view, which I think is more useful. And there's also a converter toggle, which lets you convert between different units. So for example, you can now run currency conversions powered by Yahoo Finance, which I find are usually around 99% accurate. Now, I was also hoping that we would get some kind of interactive widget that we could place on the home screen for the calculator, but it looks like we haven't got that just yet. But thankfully, if you activate Stage Manager, the calculator will readjust in size, so you can now get the iPhone version of the app on your iPad. Having said that, I think that this part of the calculator app actually isn't that useful, mainly because anytime I need to perform quick calculations on my iPad, I just open up Spotlight Search for that, because it's a lot more efficient to just press Command and space than it is to open an actual app. And Spotlight Search can do most of what the calculator app can do. It can run conversions, and it can even perform advanced math calculations involving things like logarithms and exponentials. Where the calculator app really shines though is with this new Math Notes feature, which has obviously been hyped up quite a lot, and I feel like a lot of people online have sort of misunderstood what this feature is actually meant to do. So at the bottom left, if you tap on the calculator button and hit Math Notes, you'll be taken to what kind of looks like the Notes app inside of the calculator. And the UI works almost exactly how the standard Notes app would. But what's new here is that if I write in a calculation like 2 plus 2 lots of 3, the iPad will recognize those numbers and perform that calculation for me. And you can run some pretty advanced calculations involving things like trigonometry and logarithms, and the calculator can understand all of those, provided your handwriting is at least semi-legible. And what's even more impressive about this is that you can assign and store variables directly within the calculator app. So let's say you were doing some physics, and you know that gravity has an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second squared. If I was writing in a formula like weight equals mass times acceleration due to gravity, the iPad will understand that g is a shorthand for 9.8, and it will multiply that by my mass to give me my weight in newtons. And if that wasn't enough, you can also plot graphs of these functions, and the graphs will adjust in real time as you change the values of the parameters of the function. So it's kind of like having Desmos's scientific calculator and graphing apps merged into one. Now, I will caution you that this feature won't technically solve actual equations for you. So for example, if you try writing out a quadratic equation and solving it for x, you can't technically do stuff like that just yet. Similarly, you can't compute things like differentials or integrals or matrices just yet. So you will still need to use tools like Wolfram Alpha or ChatGPT for those. Really, the Math Notes feature is made for quickly running calculations where you've already given the calculator all of the numbers that it needs, and you've already made x the subject. So it basically helps you to quickly do the final step of a standard math problem, but you still have to go out and solve the rest of the problem for yourself. So for all of the students who are looking for a way to cheat on their next maths assignment, you're out of luck with this one. I think what I'm most interested to see though is if Apple will make this Math Notes feature available as an API for other developers to use inside of their own apps. Because a lot of students, who I presume are the main sort of target audience for a feature like this, often use apps like GoodNotes and Notability for most of their note taking. And yeah, I don't know if this Math Notes feature alone would be enough to make me switch over from something like GoodNotes over to Apple Notes. Now, if you're not a student or an academic, you can still make use of the Math Notes feature during your everyday life, because this feature is also available in the new updated Notes app. So now, when you open Notes, you'll see that Math Notes has its own separate section which contains all of the notes synced from the calculator app. But even if we go into, say, Quick Notes and start typing in some numbers, the iPad will recognize that this is a calculation and automatically run that calculation for us. So say if you were doing your monthly budget, the Notes app would recognize that you're trying to do a sum of all of your expenses, and it will perform that sum for you. Or let's say that I was investing in an asset abroad that I bought for £15 and I was receiving €15 in income. I could calculate my return on investment as being my income over expenses. And the first thing you're probably thinking here is that 15 over 20 does not equal 0.63. However, if we convert that €15 into British pounds and then divide that by 20, we can see that MathNotes has actually given us our return on investment in British pounds, and it's done the currency conversion for us. Like I said, you will want to make sure that your handwriting is at least semi-legible in order for this feature to work properly. But even if you're somebody who has messy handwriting, or doctor's handwriting, as it's apparently called, there is a new feature called Smart Script, which basically uses machine learning and some fancy AI wizardry to try and make your handwriting appear neater, whilst also preserving your handwriting style, like in the shot you can see here. Obviously, if your writing is straight out illegible, then you probably don't really have any hope. But if you're somebody who has semi-legible handwriting that's a bit messy at times, you can use SmartScript to neaten things up a bit. And you can even copy a piece of typed up text online and then paste that into your own handwriting style using the Apple Pencil. And again, I am hoping that other apps like GoodNotes and Notability will have access to this feature as an API, because I think that this could be a game changer for students trying to take notes on their iPad. Now, there are also a few other changes inside of the Notes app, like being able to finally change the color of text so that it stands out a bit more. And you can also create collapsible sections that hide information inside of these toggles, sort of similar to apps like Notion. So if you were writing lecture notes for an exam, you could write out a list of exam questions and hide the answers inside of those toggles, and then use the list you've created to test yourself. And if that wasn't enough, there's also a feature that lets you record audio directly into the Notes app, and then an AI model will transcribe what's being said live as you're speaking and turn that into text. This feature is also available in the Voice Memos app, and it's pretty incredible overall. But what's even more incredible is this folding case from Pitaka, who were kind enough to send this over to me. Pitaka make a number of premium accessories for various tech devices, like the Smag EZ Fold case that gives you a number of different viewing angles, whilst also offering protection for the sides of your iPad and your Apple Pencil. And the design of the folding mechanism almost gives it an origami-like aesthetic, which I'm a huge fan of. But my favourite accessory is actually the Mag EZ Folio stand that sits on my desk and floats my iPad whenever I'm using it as a second display on my desk. It kind of feels like having a mini iMac, especially with that floating design, but without the massive chin. And with the stand being made from an aramid fiber material, it can wirelessly charge accessories like my iPhone and AirPods. I'll leave a link to Pitaka's website and all of the products I've mentioned in the description below. Make sure to check them out. Now, coming back out, the third feature that we have on our list is actually one that's taken directly from iOS 18, and that's the new redesigned Control Center. So when you open Control Center, you'll notice that the buttons now have a slightly rounded look to them compared to the squarish design they had before. And if you press and hold onto the screen, you'll see that we now have the option to rearrange and add in icons directly from the Control Center. And we've also got a list of new system functions, including Siri shortcuts, that you can run all through Control Center now. A word of caution though, you might want to be careful when rearranging these app icons, because one small misstep can completely mess up your entire layout. And as of right now, there's no back button that lets you go back to your old layout. Now, I do think that Apple missed a big opportunity to take advantage of the iPad's additional screen real estate here, because you still have all of this space on the left, which is basically empty and unused. And I feel like Apple could have made more use of this space. But instead, what they've done is they've included multiple pages which you have to scroll through to access any additional controls. Granted, you can also resize these controls to reveal more information by dragging on this hook at the bottom, sort of like how you would do with Stage Manager. Which brings me on to the next feature, which is the ability to finally resize widgets on the home screen. So previously, if you wanted to resize a widget on your home screen, you would have to delete the widget itself and then add in the resized version manually, and then reorganize all of your apps again from scratch. And it would sort of be a giant faff trying to do this. However, now, when you press onto the home screen, you get the same hook at the bottom, which lets you resize the widgets to all of the sizes that the widget supports. Granted, this only works with individual widgets as of right now, so if you're using a widget stack, you won't be able to resize those, because obviously, not every widget in the stack will support the exact same sizing options. But overall, I think that this is a long overdue feature. Next up, we have a bit more of a pro feature, which is the ability to finally format and reset external drives on the iPad. And this is something that pro users have been asking for a long time. You can sort of think of formatting as being like a factory reset for your external drive. The reason you typically want to do this is that there are different hard drive formats like exFAT and APFS, which work slightly better on different devices and platforms than others. And previously, you could only reset these drives to your desired format using a Mac or a PC. However, now, if you go into the Files app and press onto your external drive when it's connected, you'll have the option to erase the drive and reformat it. Again, 99% of you watching might not ever use this feature, but if you're a proper pro user using their iPad for sort of video editing and lots of file exporting, then this feature might potentially benefit your workflow. However, the next feature is probably one that will definitely benefit you if you've ever had to do any kind of tech support for your family. Because now, whenever you hop onto a FaceTime call with somebody on your iPad and that person shares their screen with you, you can create annotations that will show up on their screen instructing that person what to do. And this goes even further because the other person can now give you permission for you to remotely control their device from your iPad. So if I was on a FaceTime call with my mum, who didn't know where the subscribe button on this video was, I could direct her to the correct place right from my iPad. Now, the final feature on our list is also another feature that's taken directly from the iPhone, and that's the new home screen customization options. So you've probably already seen a bunch of other YouTube videos on this, but anytime you hold onto the home screen and press on this edit button on the top left and tap customize, you can now customize the color theme of the icons on your iPad home screen. So you can make everything dark, for example, and quite famously, you can also tint the colors of the icons to say match the color of this wallpaper, which you can find linked in the description below. Plus, there's also an option to enlarge the app icons if you want to remove the text beneath them. Now, this could very much wind up being one of those features that everybody talks about at the beginning and then slowly forgets about afterwards. Sort of like Memoji back in the day, because whilst you can get some really nice looking setups with this tool, I've also seen some pretty bad looking setups online. So those are some of the main features coming to iPadOS 18 later this year. There are of course other features like the updates to messages and photos and all of the Apple Intelligence stuff, which I didn't get a chance to cover in this video. I'll be covering those more in depth during my actual iOS 18 review later this year in around September/October. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video. But overall, I'd say that I am kind of underwhelmed with this new iPadOS 18 update. I mean, it's not like I was expecting a huge update because, of course, we did get the new M4 iPad Pros and the M2 iPad Airs earlier this year. And typically, anytime Apple makes a big hardware update, the software usually gets a smaller upgrade and vice versa. And I imagine that most of Apple's engineering resources were dedicated to building out Apple Intelligence and all of the new AI features. So naturally, there would have been less sort of engineering bandwidth left over for iPadOS. But let me know in the comments below what you think of this new update. Consider leaving a like if this video was helpful. It helps the channel out more than you know, and subscribe for the next one.